This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. Learn more at indiefilmhustle.tv. I'd like to welcome to the show the legendary Chris Gore. Thank you so much, sir, for being on the show, sir.
Wow, I don't get introduced often as legendary, so thank you for that.
Well, like
Alex.
I was saying, like we were saying off air, you and I are of similar vintages, so we've walked over the same dead bodies at Sundance many a day.
Like a fine bourbon. That's what we're like. Yeah,
exactly.
We've been through all that.
Oh, we got the shrapnel without question.
Yeah.
We got some shrapnel in this business
For sure.
So I met you once. You don't remember, I'm sure, but I met you once in 2006 at the Mexican Cantina in the Slam Dance building, in the Slam Dance Hotel.
I remember that. That was fun. Usually where they have an open bar.
Right, exactly. So it was that time, and I was just starting out. Like it was like 2005, 2006, and I remember meeting you for a minute, and you're like, "Hey, how you doing, man?" That was it. It was like, real quick. It was people were going crazy. They were all around you and stuff. But I never forgot that, and I've always been a big fan of Film Threat, which is a company that you started. So I mean, we're going to talk for a bit. So, and I know we're going to get into this, and I know we could probably have a weekly show together. At this point,
Yeah.
We've been. By the way, everyone listening, Chris and I have been talking for about an hour prior to the record.
We've been trying to solve some sound issues, which I hope it sounds good. But I mean, also just like our conversation, I'm like, that we should have recorded that.
It should have been good.
Recorded it.
Two film geeks just talking. All right. So how did you get in this whole world of independent filmmaking in the first place?
Well, first of all, let's start back at the beginning with the first issue of Film Threat, which came out on February 6th, 1985. Mm-hmm. And I was obsessed with the book Dune when I was in high school. I read it every year, loved that book. And then the movie came out. It was a colossal disappointment to me because I love David Lynch. I mean, David Lynch was an inspiration. He was one of the filmmakers I loved. I was fortunate enough to have parents who really were, encouraged reading and alternative media. I went to see a lot of world cinema. I grew up like watching a lot of world cinema as a kid. Mm-hmm. My mom would encourage me, like, go to the art house. Don't go see those movies at the mall, right? And I remember growing up sort of hating John Hughes movies. I know everybody loves them, but I think the only one I like was Ferris Bueller. Anyway, so that sort of like anger at the disappointment of Dune led to the first issue of Film Threat, which was started with a guy named Andre Seawood, who was my best friend at Wayne State University. We since parted ways, and I kind of took every issue of Film Threat just kind of got bigger than the last one. But really, my heart is in anything. I mean, it wasn't, back in 1985, independent film, that word wasn't used.
No.
Independent film was born, I believe, in 1989.
Yes, so Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
When the United States Film Festival changed its name to Sundance.
Yep.
When Sex, Lies, and Videotape played that festival, and it had already, the video rights were gone, but the theatrical rights were available. And then it went to Cannes, won the Palme d'Or, and I believe that 89 is the year indie film was born. And then filmmakers like Spike Lee, Jim Jarmusch, they were coming up there. They were considered art films, but really it was 89, I believe, is when independent film was born. And then from then, Film Threat covered anything that was considered cult alternative film. That was sort of where our focus was. But once that term was born, it was like, oh yeah, these are all indie movies. When you look at like the landscape, and just, we had such a great conversation before you started recording. We were talking about just how much, because I actually understand what Coppola and Scorsese are trying to say. Mm-hmm. They're not, I don't believe that they're necessarily against these films, but the point is that they take up the oxygen in the room. They take up the conversation, so that when you look on YouTube, the space at YouTube, when people talk about movies, they obsessively talk about Star Wars. They obsessively talk about Marvel movies. And I feel like if you exist on a diet of Disney, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, it's going to be bad for you. It's sort of like living only on carbs. It's not good yet. You got to have a balanced diet. Right. You have to have a balanced diet. And I believe a balanced media diet is healthy. little world cinema in there, little independent film, some documentaries there. And then when the one Star Wars movie that comes out every 2 years and disappoints you, it's not going to be such a colossal disappointment because you augmented your media diet with other types of movies. So the whole purpose, the mission of Film Threat, which hasn't changed from the beginning, is to champion these films and give them a voice. So every day you're discovering new filmmakers. You're reading about short films you never would have heard about playing at festivals. Every day we post between 3 to 5 reviews daily, every day, never not, even on weekends. When we're at a festival, it's even more, 10 or 15 reviews a day from a diverse group of writers located all over the world. We have a writer in South Korea, oddly, who teaches English as a second language, Adam Keller. He contributes reviews to the site. So it really is many voices talking about all these films that you would never have heard about had you not gone to the website.
And there is a need for that now, because I do agree with you. Like when Marty and Francis, because I know them personally, obviously. So right. So when Marty and Francis said that what they said, I got there's a lot of people who were like, oh, they're just the old grumpy men. And I get what they're saying. And look, it's Martin Scorsese, man. Martin Scorsese can say whatever Martin Scorsese wants to say. What he did do, though, is piss off millions, if not billions of people who have an emotional attachment to those films. Right. Kevin Smith said it very clearly. He goes, Martin Scorsese doesn't have any attachment to these characters, but you and I do, because we grew up reading those comic books and really loving that kind of culture of the comic book culture. So they mean a lot to us. Like, when I watched Avengers Endgame, if no one's seen Avengers Endgame and I give a spoiler out right now, it's on you. I'm sorry. It's made like $3 billion. It's on you guys. But when what happens to Robert Downey happens, and those characters, and when all of them get like, they were so emotional, and there's tears coming down your face. That's what cinema is. If you're able to pull an emotion out, that is what cinema is. So to a certain extent, those movies are cinema at a very high level, not like bougie kind of very high class level, but it's doing what cinema was built to do. But I agree with what your comments are, where you can't eat. Look, it's just like when you have kids and they're away and they just eat pizza and ice cream all day. If I gave my girls pizza and ice cream all day, they would eat it. But they would pay for it.
Right.
And I think what you're saying is perfect.
Well, I agree. And also, I think a lot of people forget that those Marvel characters, not just about the movies, this last decade of the Infinity Saga, it's the, legacy of these characters in groundbreaking comic books, also brought to life via animation. I, watch those old 60s cartoons, which are based on the original, like a lot of the original Jack Kirby art, with limited animation. You watch those now, they don't really move a lot.
Not so much.
But they were based on the comic books. So here it is. And this is going to sound cheesy, but every time that Marvel logo would come up and I'd hear the sort of music swell, I get chills and choked up, because I grew up reading Stan Lee. I mean, when I was like, 7, 8 years old, I'm reading these comics. Now they don't hold up as well, but they were operatic. They were Shakespearean. They were dramatic. They were so it's all that emotion built up, not from that and the movies. So, but at the same time, I saw The Irishman, and I will say this, let me confirm something for you. They are not going to make an Irishman theme park ride. That's never going to happen.
Never, ever.
It's not going to happen.
There's not going to be Irishman t-shirts or lunch boxes.
They're not going to no action figures. There's 1/6 scale, De Niro character. It's not going to happen.
But I would pay for that, by the way. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I would get one.
Someone's got to have made a Travis Bickle 1/6 scale action figure.
There has to be one.
I always see someone during Halloween cosplay as Travis Bickle. Halloween or at like Dragon Con. That's where I've seen those characters. But see, while I love this mainstream stuff, I understand it for what it is, right? Mm-hmm. It's also, these corporations that are built on a world market now, mm-hmm. not just the U.S. market. So there are all types of different concerns. I think Francis Ford Coppola said it best when he was saying that studio filmmaking has evolved into factory filmmaking. It's factory filmmaking now. This is what they make. They make factory films, and it's made for the widest possible audience. And, I like a good popcorn movie, but I also like a film like, I saw this movie the other day. It was sort of a lo-fi sci-fi movie called The Other Todd.
Okay.
I think it's going to be at AFM. I don't think it's even out commercially, but I was fortunate to see it. I'm dying to talk to the interviews on a podcast. But it's just, you see that they made the movie they could with the resources they have. But if you look also Marvel, they have really fostered a group of, when you look at the creatives they go after people who are,
independent filmmakers.
indie filmmakers. James Gunn, like
John Favreau, the Russo brothers.
They all came from indie film. They all had like movies at Slam Dance or something. You know what I mean? Like, so that's what I think is great about Marvel. I think they've been the most successful of those entities. So I think Star Wars has had its share of problems. That's another conversation. But I really feel like a balanced media diet will make you appreciate a good studio movie as well as appreciate a good indie documentary or whatever. Like, my taste is all over the map, but I feel like we're living in this golden age where there's so much of it, and that's why you need I think people, at least if they read Filmthread on a regular basis, appreciate that we cover these types of films.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of coverage of these kind of films anymore, like as opposed to the early 90s and the 90s in general, which was a golden. It was the golden era of independent film as we know it today. Can you talk a little bit about, because you were, in the early 90s, in 89, 90, 91, 92, in those first 6-7 years of the 90s and 89, it was every week there was a new masterpiece. Every week there was a new filmmaker being crowned by someone in Mount Hollywood would come down. Usually it's that one guy we don't like to talk about, but
well, I know you're talking about.
Of course we do. We all know who we're talking about. There was that one guy, but the point is that he, for whatever he did bring up a lot of people and open doors for a lot of people in as far as independent filmmakers are concerned. Can you explain what the energy is like? Because you were literally running in those circles back then. Like,
it was crazy. It was exciting. And we're doing, I'm actually doing a documentary about Film Threat called Film Threat Sucks. If you just go to YouTube, you can look up Film Threat Sucks trailer. There's a sizzle reel we put out there, which helped us get a deal to do a documentary. I'm a producer on it, but I'm not directing it. I'm not I handed over 100 hours of VHS footage, but it's amazing. We've been going through the old Film Threat archives because I saved everything. And at the time, those were letters. Let me explain what letters are. Letters is like an email, but on a really thin slice of wood. That's what a letter is. And you used to mail them to people, and you would correspond. In any case, I saved all these letters. I have letters from Kevin Smith, actually, just sending letters to Film Threat before he did Clerks, right? Like, he was a reader of Film Threat. In fact, there was an article on Vice recently about the 25th anniversary of Clerks, and Scott Mosier and Kevin Smith bonded over being readers of Film Threat. But yeah, it was exciting. I mean, one of my experiences, I remember being in the room, seeing, because we did a set report on Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs, right? We did a set report, like, this new filmmaker's making a movie, it's going to be amazing, and got into one of the very first screenings to critics of Reservoir Dogs. Right. And my memory of it was sitting there with a bunch of the people from the Film Threat crew. We would go to see movies in groups at that time, and we just looked at each other like, oh my God, this is a revelation. Like, this is like, we're seeing like the anointing of a new talent. And then I looked over, and during the ear scene, the critic from Entertainment Weekly got up and walked out and was like horrified during that scene.
Right.
So, and it got kind of limited coverage in Entertainment Weekly. Of course, it wasn't till later. I feel like Film Threat's always been the pioneer and on the forefront, but you'd get no points for that. It's like, we discover people early. We talk to those filmmakers at the beginnings of their careers, and then, of course, they ignore us, and so that they can do something with Vanity Fair. I think that happened recently with Todd Phillips, Todd Phillips did Joker. I reached out to him on Instagram. I DM'd him. I'm like, Todd, you want to do the Film Threat podcast? Never heard back. And Todd Phillips, by the way, I knew him when he was a student at NYU. He ran the New York Underground Film Festival. He created it. Film Threat released 2 volumes of VHS tapes at the time of shorts from the New York Underground Film Festival. And Film Threat also distributed Todd Phillips' first feature film, which was a documentary called Hated, Gigi Allen and the Murder Junkies. It was about Gigi Allen. And during the making of that, I remember sitting there in an office with David E. Williams, who was the editor of Film Threat Video Guide, and we're working on the video sleeve for Todd Phillips' movie.
What is this VHS video stuff you speak of?
Exactly.
I really don't understand.
Well, that's right. It was on magnetic tape, and anyways, this is the 90s. This is before DVD.
Of course.
So and
DVDs and DVDs are. No, sorry.
These are exactly. Well, but like,
I know.
Look,
dude.
I'm just as guilty as anyone else. I can't tell you how many times I've rebought Star Wars.
I had the laser disc, bro. I had the lasers. I had the VHSs. I mean, come on. Yeah.
I kept the laser disc. I still have the Criterion Collection definitive. I have nothing to play it on, but I own it. It's got a cool book. Anyways, but yeah, we got a call that Gigi Allen had died. Mm-hmm. I mean, he died tragically, and Todd Phillips went out to film the funeral, so we had to recut his movie, and we had to change the video box. That was in the middle of that happening. So we were kind of at the forefront of a lot of things happening because there weren't any other outlets really. I mean, Film Threat was. Well, by the time it was 92, we split into two magazines, Film Threat Video Guide and then Film Threat Magazine. But my whole thing was I read this great essay years ago, which you got to find. Just look up on the internet that Matt Groening had wrote about leaking subversive ideas into the mainstream. And he wrote a whole essay about this. And if you look at The Simpsons, the whole history of The Simpsons, if that was done as a live action show, it could never have been done. The Simpsons commentary on drugs, religion, politics, the police, just everything. Society in general, you could never do as a live action show. They would be canceled, as the kids say today. Mm-hmm. But that was my whole thing with Film Threat is, okay, we're going to sort of give it a mainstream, candy coated shell, but then we're going to feed you underground filmmakers like Jörg Buttgereit from Germany, or, like Allison Anders, or, mm-hmm. Kevin Smith, or, these are the people that would be featured in Film Threat. And when you look now, I do think that, back to Scorsese and Coppola's comment, like the oxygen in the room is taken a little too much. I think that it's really incumbent upon, I don't have to tell you this at all, but other journalists in this space to go, do you only care about clicks? Do you care about clickbaity headlines? Do you only care about like outrage and triggering people? Mm-hmm. Is it just sort of a thing of like, there's a whole argument now, like Rey is the best Jedi. Who gives a shit? Who gives a crap? I have a daughter. I'm glad that there's a female Jedi. I question that even like when the early Star Wars movies, I'm like, are there no female Jedi? It just seems like Star Wars, a lot of different species, but not a lot of women in the galaxy, No,
and they didn't have, and apparently they didn't have bras, according to Carrie Fisher back in the first one.
I remember that. But it's just like, look, these are stupid arguments. These are just like, you can there's some Star Wars movies I like more than others. You can pick them apart. But if that's all you're spending your time on and spinning your wheels, you're missing out on hundreds, if not thousands, of incredible independent films and experiences. And my whole thing, there's been a controversy lately about white male critics, right? White male critics and whatnot. And I think the best thing that we can do is constantly seek out diverse voices to talk about film. Mm-hmm. But the whole point of a movie is so that you can empathize with someone who isn't you, so that I can empathize with someone who is not my same gender or my same ethnicity, or even maybe a spork, right? You can, the whole
spork. I empathize with the spork. I
empathize with the spork, or someone who's not your same sexuality, sure. Right? Like who doesn't share your same sexuality. The whole point, and this is why I love going to Sundance or film festivals that champion these films and this diverse group of filmmakers, and always have. I talked to a friend, a journalist recently, I won't name, who was complaining that Sundance has become so woke lately. I'm like, how long have you been going to Sundance? It was always woke. Just we didn't use that word. It's just whatever. Maybe we overuse these words in a divisive way when really it should be about experiencing the world through someone else's eyes. And I think once you have the opportunity to do that, you're forever changed, as I have been by so many of the films that I have seen at Sundance and Slamdance and South by Southwest and Tribeca and Toronto and AFI and so many of the festivals that I've been honored to be a part of and have that opportunity. I know you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that a diverse media diet in film will just be eye-opening to so much more that you could see.
Now I want to talk about
that was rant. Sorry about that.
It's fine. It's fine.
I can't drop this mic, but if I could mic drop this mic, can I tip it over?
You could. No, don't tip it over, please, for the sound, sir. For the sound. Cool. I want to talk to you about there's an 800-pound gorilla in the room that we always talk about in film in the film festival world. And you wrote an amazing book called The Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide, when there was no internet, really, and there was no other information about film festivals. Like, this was the definitive guide to dealing with film festivals and doing all that stuff. You know, you've been going to Sundance since arguably the very beginning. I've been going to Sundance for probably since 2005. I think was my first one. So I've been there.
First was 96, but I sent other people from Film Thread to cover it.
Right, but
actually, I think Eugene Hernandez of IndieWire, on behalf of Film Thread, actually went to Sundance back in, like, I don't know, 91 maybe, 92.
So, you know, Sundance has always been kind of like the crown jewel of the independent film world. And it's because they crowned so many kings and queens at that festival. At a certain point in time, they did. And that mythos of Sundance it's still ringing to this day, where filmmakers believe that if you go into Sundance, you get into Sundance and you, God forbid, win Sundance, your entire life will change forever. With that said, absolutely. If you get into Sundance, you're going to get attention. You're going to get some people. But I know many Sundance winners who couldn't sell their film, never got a call back, never got
I'll give you the statistic. It's 80% of the films that play Sundance have no distribution 2 years after Sundance. So that myth that it's all going to change, I think it'll change for attention. I also think that it might be better to go to a smaller film festival like Dead Center, you know, or something like that in Oklahoma, like where you be as part of a smaller group, right? So I look on playing festivals as sort of, you know, this sort of tour. But if you break down the movies that play Sundance, right, which is north of 200, right, south of 300. When you look at the films that play there, there's a certain percentage that are meant to get attention. These budget studio movies, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, like, because when I was going, and even in the 90s, there was no mini majors. There were an independent film was Clerks. That was an independent film, not a $27,000 movie, you know, or Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was arguably a little bit more expensive at that time. But it was that range. Now you're talking about $10 million movies with stars that we know, and that's the indie.
Well, but having said that, because I think this is the weird. I tend to look at the arguments on all sides, right? Okay. Too, which probably makes me alt-right at these days in this political climate.
Fair enough.
Because I want to have some understanding of where things are. But there's a section of Sundance that is all these star films that are star-driven, right, with big actors. And a lot of what I'll say is sometimes Sundance feels like a wrestling match where the results of the wrestling match are, you know, determined before the match begins. Meaning a lot of films will go to Sundance, they already have distribution, and it's really about sort of kicking off a premiere. So it's a movie that is going to be on HBO in a month anyways, right?
Or on Netflix or on Amazon.
Or Netflix. Like, and you know what? That's okay. Because those movies that have these big stars attract the world media, so that a new filmmaker who just made a movie with nothing has the chance to get some attention in the midst of all of that. So there still exists this desire to champion new up-and-coming filmmakers, the person who sold his collection to finance a film, Kevin Smith, with Clerks. And that, you know what I mean? That still exists. But the thing that gets, and this is where I'll go back to the lazy media, the media is just lazy. They are the ones that only pay attention to those big films that are coming to Netflix or coming, you know, we're talking about filmmakers that can't afford a publicist, right? Which is why in my book, I actually tell you, like, here's DIY publicity. And I would argue, looking back, because people have asked, are you going to rewrite it? And I look at the core information of the book, it hasn't changed. The mediums have changed, now you can do a Snapchat. But I once argued with an indie filmmaker once, I said, you can play the festival circuit, or you could take your 80-minute feature film, divide it up into 2-minute segments, release your movie as an app, and more people might see it. Radical, I know, but I feel like you have to be creatively radical, because if you look at indie film, to me, is on the forefront always of new ways of selling. And even if you look at the way that studios sell their movies, they're using underground and guerrilla marketing techniques to market in big budget studio films, especially if you go to something like San Diego Comic-Con, which is this big pop culture event that I've gone to, that's also kind of, experienced the same problems as Sundance. Mm-hmm. And that problem is both Sundance and San Diego Comic-Con are victims of their own success. So
no question.
I think that exactly. But as a filmmaker, you have to try for that, but you always have to have a plan B, because you got to have a plan B of like, you just have to assume you're not going to get in, but there's no reason not to try. I mean, people win the lottery, right? So submit to Sundance, Toronto, South by, you know the drill, and then submit to these smaller B festivals. You might not, or just take the pathway of locking in your distribution. If you reach certain creative benchmarks, you can, and you're able to backwards engineer. I co-wrote and produced a film years ago called My Big Fat Independent Movie. Yeah. And I just looked at like, well, what movies in that space? It's a dumb spoof parody film. It did okay, 23% on Rotten Tomatoes, by the way. I don't want to brag. I don't want to brag, but I think that's higher.
Is it still out there? Is it still out there? Do you own it still?
I got the rights back, and at some point there'll be a digital release.
Oh, you haven't released it digitally yet?
Not digitally, but it is. You can find it. Look, you can find it used on DVD on Amazon for like $2.
Right, but you're gonna do it. But you're gonna do a digital release on it.
We're gonna do a digital release just so we can bring it to HD. Right.
Okay. Sure.
So, but like, I just sort of backwards engineered, like, well, what do people in the space pay for this movie at this level? What are the kind of actors that we need to have in it? And we had like Paget Brewster, Clint Howard, Bob Odenkirk has a bit part in it. Like, I sort of backwards engineered what these movies make, and then so how much I should spend on the budget.
That was amazing. It's amazing. Like, you thought this way. This is revolutionary.
Like, it's basic business sense.
Yeah.
I think it's because I've always been somewhat entrepreneurial with launching Film Threat when I was effectively a teenager, to, just like, I came from a pretty poor family back in Detroit. My parents got divorced and I was young. I never knew that we were poor until I got to high school, and I'm like, what's with all the ski club? And I think I might have had like 2 pairs of pants, at the time. But like, I don't know, I didn't care. I feel like, and you're a father, I'm a father. I feel like when children are loved, money, it doesn't matter. It doesn't. If there's love in that family,
you figure everything else out. Everything else out.
But I was so frustrated by, like, I wanted to go to USC because my hero George Lucas, bring it back to Star Wars. I wanted to go to USC, and I could not afford to go to USC at all. It was not an option for me. And I remember visiting my uncle in California and begging my mother to take me to the campus of USC. I walked into the campus bookstore. I bought a copy of every book I could. It was a huge stack. Spent $200 on books, and then I wrote down the titles of every film and every book and every author, and I read every single one of the books that the kids who went to USC film program. I read all those books. And then in my film class, which was at Wayne State University, basically a commuter college, I typed out a list, this 2-page list of, here's all the books that the kids at USC read. We should read these books. I mean, I was so annoying in college. Not that that's changed. I know I can be an irritant.
Oh, I was too, my friend.
Okay. Young, dumb, and
there you go.
Passionate. Yeah. So, but I read all those books, and I was just obsessed with, like, well, I'm going to get the same education. And then, look, I'm a college dropout who wrote a book that some colleges force you to read, AFI, USC, UCLA. I do speaking engagements there every once in a while, and I'll point out that, like, you're paying for this education. I'm here speaking in front of you, and I'm a dropout because I looked at the money I was spending. Is just a clear choice for me. The money I was spending to go to college because I was working 3 jobs. I still had newspaper routes when I was in college.
What is this newspaper you speak of?
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing. And I was like, I can just read these books. I don't need to regurgitate to a professor to prove to this professor that I had read the book. I can just read the book on my own. And then I started reading books about like how to publish a magazine. I read a book about marketing called, which is in a new edition, which I highly recommend, called Marketing Warfare. And it's a history of marketing, which I read this when I was like 20 years old. You know, like these were in the wheel. Well, it's like if I'm going to do a magazine, I need to know how to market things. If I'm going to make movies, I need to know how to market. Marketing Warfare, it's the history of rivalries in marketing.
Oh.
Burger King, McDonald's, Coke, Pepsi, why some brands choose to be, actively choose to be a second or third in the space because they can be, they can be more profitable in certain senses. So it's a fascinating book that walks you through the history of marketing these various companies. And then I also read books, Ogilvy and Mather. George Ogilvy wrote a book about advertising, Confessions of an Ad Man, which is a great book. There's so much information there on fonts.
I know.
One day I would love to design a font, but concepts of font usage, I was obsessed with stuff like that when it came to print. So I feel like, and look, it's Quentin Tarantino, he dropped out when he was, not that I'm comparing myself to him, but there's no correct pathway to being successful in entertainment.
No.
Medium. There are people who went to film school and did that route and, have advantages with money. And there are those that take other pathways.
Spielberg didn't get it. Tarantino,
Tarantino dropped out of school when he was in 8th grade.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a special case. He's an outlier without question. He's an outlier, but we're the only business that there is no clear path ever. There really isn't. Yeah. I mean, there's certain, like if you want to be an agent or you want to be a manager, you want to do TV, if you're able to get into one of those programs, maybe if you work up the way, but those kind of have fallen apart. They're not as big as they used to be. Those kind of mentorship, they used to be, that was the only way. But nowadays with the technology changing, look, this is what I tell people all the time. The world is changing so rapidly. Our business, what was true 6 months ago, is no longer true now in distribution, in the cameras we're using, and how we're like, there's so much radical change that by the time you're like, okay, I got it, you're gone. It's already moved by the point. Like, you know what? I think I got this whole 4K thing down. I'm like, that's fine. They're shooting 10K now. Do we need to shoot 10K? That's a whole other conversation. But because if you shoot 10K, the same camera they shot Guardians of the Galaxy with, it's going to make your film a lot better, regardless of story. But so there's things are changing so rapidly that you can't just look at what's going on now. You have to look and think about what's coming around the corner. And like just on distribution side, because you and I both have a friend in common, Linda from Indie Rights. I've learned volumes from her because I've seen numbers and they're like, and I've seen it in my own work and I've seen it in other filmmakers, that TVOD is pretty much dead. Transactional video on demand is pretty much dead for independent filmmakers unless you can drive tremendous amounts of traffic to those areas. Now it's SVOD and AVOD. 2 years ago when I released my first independent film, I made a lot of money on TVOD. I know guys who made $3 million off their first movie with a dedicated audience on TVOD. But now that's gone. And now people are like, and I hear them, I consult them all the time. They're just like, oh, I think we're going to go to iTunes. Why? So that's why I'm just my point that things are changing. So there is no path.
Right.
It has to. You have to pick your own path.
And you have to build your own audience. I think that's important with this. Part of the reason I was coming on here was to talk about this Kickstarter that I have going on currently that ends November 12th. And part of what we're doing with that is building audience so that when the film does come out, we'll actually have an audience that wants to sit, that may have just heard about it. I think it will help us in the space in terms of distribution. So yeah, I've got a Kickstarter. It's for a film that I want to make called Attack of the Dock. And Attack of the Dock is about this television show called Attack of the Show on this network G4 that was huge, really dominated the nerd space from 2005 to 2013. And the show went away, yet, I'm still going to conventions and people are still asking me, whatever happened to Attack of the Show? What happened to this show? So I want to, through this documentary, take a nostalgic look back at the show, revisit and interview people who were involved behind the scenes and in front of the camera, and then also take a look at how geek culture has changed between 2005, when we were all excited about all these new tech and devices, and we get together and we'd have this sort of collective conversation, to the kind of divided space that exists now, this sort of fracturing of fandom due to, I believe, social media. Mm-hmm. So sort of by looking at taking a lens and pointing it towards our recent past and looking here's how we used to talk to each other back then. Now, how are we talking to each other now? Because I feel like I think I can talk about this here. Is one of the threads that I intend to explore is the way we talk to each other online. Mm-hmm. I feel that we're not going to solve not one of the world's problems: hunger, economic disparity, the world climate,
racism, all of it.
None of those problems will be solved until we learn how to speak to each other respectfully on the internet. Because if you just spend time on the internet and see the toxicity that's on our various social media platforms, you would think that we're spiraling towards Civil War II, right? Except then I go out in the real world and I realize no one cares. Most people, when you interact with them, I believe are friendly. I believe are, I guess I'm lucky.
Look, we all run into our asses. I mean, there's always that dude, and especially in our business.
There's always going to be that jerky person that, is going to get captured being an a-hole, on camera. That exists, and that is a small percentage, and that will never, ever go away. That will never go away. But the majority of people that I experience in all my travels, and see, this is also easy for me to say as an old white dude, right? But it's I feel like it's not as bad, it's not as hopeless as it looks. Maybe it's something that people are sort of exercising demons online, that's sort of it's this little gremlin that comes out, this sort of evil, angry gremlin that people have. That this sounds like a horror movie I'm pitching now. Mm-hmm. That people express that online, and then in real life, for the most part. You hear people complain about millennials all the time. I love millennials. I think they're the most polite generation. I'm not going to sit there and crap all over millennials. There may be some work issues with that, but there's millennials that work at Film Threat, but for the most part, my experience is they're awesome. So it's just a different criteria. But so for this, if you go to attackofthedoc.com, mm-hmm. It'll point you to the Kickstarter, and you can check out the video that we made, which is sort of a taste of the things that we'll explore. We just actually did cross our first funding goal, which was to start shooting the movie. It's $25,000 just to start shooting. We want to reach a next milestone. We'll release the movie on Blu-ray, hard copies, which was only because everyone demanded that we do it. There's so many backers were saying, how come there's no Blu-ray? It's people still I buy Blu-ray, I know, but I've never considered myself a traditional consumer.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I'm not normal in a number of ways, but also it'll give us a budget to be able to travel, take the production on the road. There are going to be a lot of legal hurdles to overcome, but we're just looking to make those stretch goals. I know you know a lot about Kickstarter campaigns. I'll just tell you the one thing I've learned is that the way to have a successful Kickstarter is to first have an unsuccessful Kickstarter.
Yes.
It's like market research. So I launched this campaign summer of last year, which I realized was the biggest mistake I could have made, was the timing. Never launch a Kickstarter in summer. Mm-mm. People are not on the internet as much. They've got other concerns. Make sure your average, the bullet point, what I learned, correct me if I'm wrong, your average backer donation is going to be around $40. That's going to be average.
About that, yeah.
Because that's what people are willing to part with. And if I never see anything, fine. And so I learned that. And then having an unsuccessful campaign gives you market research to readjust the campaign to make it a successful campaign. So that's what we did in the second incarnation. We had all of our ducks in a row. We had like campaign assets for social media going weeks out into the campaign that we would roll out little by little. So there'd be original material, and then we would create benchmarks for our backers, and we would incentivize them, like helping to promote the campaign. I make sure that when someone backs it, they get private message from me immediately. If not, well, I don't know. I haven't been on. I got to check my phone. But I think one of the hardest things I've learned about doing a crowdfunding campaign is this. It's like asking everyone how much money do you like me? So, I mean, it is, because
it's brutal. It's brutal. I hate it. I hate doing them. Oh,
it's just when I say I hate it, I love engaging with fans.
Sure.
That I love doing. But it is the energy that it takes to keep the
stress. Does someone like me? Does someone like me enough to get me to where I need to be? It's the crowdfunding. Like, again, if we're talking about crowdfunding 7 years ago, it's a different ballgame. But now, how I get hit up daily. Hey, support my crowdfunding. And they don't know who I am. I don't know who they are, and they're just shotgunning it, and it's just brutal. People are just so fatigued of it, especially filmmakers. Friends of filmmakers are abused at this point.
But I've contributed to quite a few. I've contributed to about 50. I backed 50 things. I'm selective. I'll back some tech projects. There's a movie that I backed like 2 years ago. That's a remake of one of my favorite 1950s exploitation movies, The Head That Wouldn't Die, or The Brain That Wouldn't Die.
Oh, I remember that movie. Yes.
So some filmmakers have remade it, and it's now going to hit the festival circuit. I'm really happy for them. I gave them some money. So I back campaigns myself. But you're right. It is a constant. I will say that the best and most effective way is a direct ask, directly asking people really, we're just trying to get to a milestone where we can. And the other lesson I will say that I've learned is postage is way more expensive now than it used to be. So I limited the number of physical rewards that we're giving away. It's a very limited number of physical rewards. So I did that. It's mostly digital rewards is what we're doing.
It's very smart. It's very smart to do it that way. Yeah, even if it's like a video of you like doing a call out or doing an interview with someone for 5 minutes or talking like that, that's a value, and it's easy to do.
And what we're doing is if you go to attackofthedoc.com, the campaign ends November 12th. I hope that you jump in. Even like I tell people, like if people are, a couple misnomers about Kickstarter is they don't charge you the money. You're not being charged money. Yeah. You can back it today. You won't be charged until, it's actually be November 13th because it's November 12th at midnight Pacific time is when the campaign ends. But people, you're not going to be backed. So I hear the excuse, I'll wait until payday, but I'm going to forget. The other thing is that if you back the campaign just for $1, which I do sometimes I'll just back a campaign for $1 because then I get updates about the movie just for $1. It's just $1, right? And what we've been doing with the backers is we have backers only videos. So we'll send an update to backers, and this is a video that's a private link that only backers can see. And this is how we're going to continue the project. The way we'll be doing it, which I have a lot of friends who are documentary filmmakers. Part of my focus with the Filmtrepreneur podcast, which is not like anything like what you're doing, but I interview a lot of filmmakers and doc filmmakers in particular. But the method that we're going about to do this documentary is I'm interviewing everyone involved in the show. And I've been in a lot of documentaries myself, a lot. They'll interview me for 30 to 60 minutes, and I'm in the documentary for 2 minutes.
If you're lucky.
If I'm lucky. Which is fine. I respect the choices of the filmmaker. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if all the people that contributed to this crowdfunding campaign, we would interview people from the show that are really interesting. Sometimes they're not the stars and the talent that were on camera. We'll interview people, we'll film all of it, and we'll release the audio of that interview as a podcast only for backers.
Awesome.
So you'll be able to hear the 30-minute, 60-minute interview with one of the editors or producers on the show.
Awesome.
They might get used, or maybe they won't be used, right? So if we reach but one of the things I put as our highest milestone, it's being really difficult to get there. Our highest milestone, if we get it, what I'm plan to do is release. I don't know any filmmaker's ever done this. We want to release all of the footage used to make the documentary onto a cloud drive so that backers could go and recut their own version of the documentary.
I've heard
They
of
could
yeah,
take
yeah.
I mean, I know like similar things that Trent Reznor has in his music has released tracks where he'll split the tracks so you can mix your own version of his songs, which I think is great. So because the viewers that used to watch Attack of the Show were so creative, I mean, they called it the viewer army, right? There was this viewer army that something would happen on the show, and within hours there'd be memes and crazy stuff and people communicating that sense of community that I don't believe exists. I really feel that fandom is fractured from all of this divisiveness that's permeated the culture, and I have tried to inoculate myself and be immune to it, but it's difficult. It's just ubiquitous. It affects a lot of things.
I'll tell you. I mean, for everyone listening, I used to watch Attack of the Show constantly. I mean, I was addicted to that show. I love the show. I was telling you off air that I was on the show in 2005 for like a minute when I was interviewed at a convention when I was promoting my movie.
Oh, Monsterpalooza?
No, it was oh god, it was a horror con. It was a horror convention in Florida. I think it was the Florida Horror Con or something like that.
Oh, nice.
I forgot what it was, but there was a guy dressed as Dracula interviewing me with a G4 microphone. I'll never forget it. Cool. And I would love to get that footage one day. You were saying maybe check archives on .org. I'll see if I can find it. But It was great. I love the show, and if you guys if you want to see stuff about independent film and fandom, this is definitely there's plenty of the episodes, I'm sure, like floating around YouTube or something.
There are a lot of that. There's a lot of that stuff on like archive.org, but really if you just follow Attack of the Doc on social media, we have Attack of the Doc on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll see we've been posting clips. We try to reach a benchmark. If we reach this, we'll release the next clip. So we've been releasing clips every other day.
Nice.
There's ways for people to participate and spread the word. We also have a private Discord where fans have been talking. What we're doing is, in a way, we're kind of reuniting that fan community that used to watch Attack of the Show in favor of doing this documentary. And part of the crowdfunding campaign is to convince some of the talents that are higher up to be involved in the documentary.
I know there's one specific higher up. I'm sure we all know. Olivia. Is Olivia going to be in it?
Absolutely, she'll be in it. Well, I mean, but my intention with it is to interview everyone over the course of about 6 months and interview Kevin and Olivia last. Okay. So that I would save them to the end to kind of like tell their own story.
They had such a fun time.
I need to earn their trust. They need to see some of the film, and I'll be able to screen some of the movie for them so that they'll see what my intention is. They need to know that my intentions are positive, that, I'm not looking to do a warts and all gossipy tell-all, and truthfully, there wasn't really a lot of drama behind the scenes of Attack of the Show. I mean, I was actually on the show from the very beginning because I was on Screensavers before it was called Attack of the Show, and I was on till the very end of the show. The only person, even Kevin wasn't all the way to the end. He had left, and then the show continued for a short time after. So I was sort of 1 foot in. I was on the show, but I was also a fan of the show. See, I used to watch the show too, but I wouldn't watch me. I already know what I
remember
said.
your segments. Your segments would come in, and you were just there to talk about film. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Now, I talk too much, as evidence of this interview.
Now, I want to ask you, in your opinion, what is the greatest challenge facing independent filmmakers today?
How to make a living. That's the greatest challenge. Is how do you balance, your passion and creativity with being practical? This comes from being entrepreneurial when I was a kid. It also comes from, having to have health care because I have children, those things when you have those realities, like, well, how do you balance that creative passion? If you're a creative person, literally you need to be creative like you need air to live, right? So how do I get that creative expression, create a positive feedback loop where you're getting useful feedback from your audience as a way to improve your creative muscles and also make a living doing it? That is the biggest challenge. So how do you have that balance? For some people, myself, I've usually been fortunate enough to have a job that was not a big time commitment, right? So I'd have a side job working on other projects, and that side job would be a thing that would, be my main source of income, but I'd only spend 10, maybe 20 hours a week on it. And then my 40, 50 hours a week would be fully focused on the Film Threat website or a movie that I'm working on or some other filmmaker that I'm trying to help, right? That, I think, is finding that life balance. I think the best answer to that question might have come from my friend Dan Mervish, who I know you know.
Yeah, Dan.
From Slam Dance. His advice in trying to reach that balance was marry a doctor. Because
he always says that in interviews. He always says that.
His wife is I don't think he minds me quoting him. In fact, Dan loves when I quote him. Yeah. His wife's a pediatrician. She is the main breadwinner. He can go off and go on. Not that Dan also doesn't make money.
Yeah.
Dan does make money doing, making independent films. He just had a successful crowdfunding campaign himself.
18 and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's smart. If you're if you have roommates, if you're you're an actor, you're a comedian, you move to Los Angeles or New York, you're going to have roommates, right? You gotta. I live in a small place. I'd show you my place, but you're seeing most of it. I have learned to live below my means, right?
Amen.
So I don't have extravagant taste. I mean, God, this sounds weird. Like, I know people, I have friends of mine who are foodies. I am not a foodie. It has driven, it's driven everyone I've been involved in a relationship with crazy to that. Like, I'm just not a foodie. I don't really care about food. If I'm spending a lot of money on food, then how can I afford movies?
Everyone's got their passions. It could be comic books. It could be statues like a life-size Yoda.
I'm seeing your collection in the background. It's pretty awesome. That Yoda's my favorite Star Wars character.
Of course,
he's small. You underestimate Yoda, and then he comes and Yoda's a badass. So love Yoda.
Yes, without
philosophy.
He's basically a Buddhist essentially, and he's a meditative yogi in so many ways.
Like finding that balance, that is the biggest challenge. So how do you as a filmmaker, because I see these filmmakers, I have seen it, they get themselves $100,000 in credit card debt. Yes. And if you paid the minimum, you would pay your
30
credit
years.
Card off in, I think the estimate is 30 years, and you would pay 3 times the amount. It's ridiculous. It's so don't get into debt, live below your means.
Yep.
Come up with something that's sustainable. I love that sustainability is now part of our larger conversation when it comes to recycling, when it comes to food consumption. Well, you need to have a sustainable lifestyle as an artist.
Yes.
So having, and also backwards engineering. You said you made your film for like $3,000, shot at Sundance. Like, of course, you'd never tell anybody that.
I do all the time. Oh no, well, for my platform, it makes sense for me to tell everybody that.
Right, but like, I know what it costs. I know what my friends who do docs, what they spend. They spend upwards of $300,000, over $1 million for some of these documentaries. I intend to make the best movie possible. Really, we have to get around the 100 range. So this is our first round of funding. Good. Hey, how we can start shooting, it at least gets us started, but we want to reach those milestones so we can make the film that I think that everyone involved will want to see us make. The other great thing about it with these backers, I'm very excited, is they can suggest questions. We plan to, whenever we're about to interview somebody, we're going to throw it out to our backers. What questions do you want us to ask?
Right.
Give them time to propose questions. And we've gotten some really amazing suggestions. So this movie is going to be made. I mean, I'm technically producing and directing it, but it's going to be this collective effort. And anyone who backs the campaign, if you back the campaign for $1, you're going to see your name going by and the end credit. It's going to be tiny, but it's going to be in a list.
So,
and you can also be a producer on it. So,
but the other thing is too, and I always preach this as well, is the whole concept of having an MVP, a minimal viable product. So the balance between what the budget can be, and it could go deeper into like the audience and can the audience justify the budget and so on and so forth that you're going to. But if you have $100,000, but you can make the movie for $25,000, doesn't it make sense to make 3 movies for $33,000? Because now you're diversifying your portfolio, and now you have a much better chance of recouping your money as opposed to throwing it all on that. You get one hit at the slot machine. Now you get 3 hits at the slot machine because.
Well, but the more valuable asset is time. Because time and focus, you only need one good film to break out, to increase your viability and sustainability, to maybe break out and direct a Marvel movie. Who knows? So I do think that focus. I know for me, whenever I'm the worst person to say this because I am juggling so many projects at once, juggle Filmthread, but I am very good. I think one thing that I know I'm able to do is break down processes to have a method that will lead to a result. So that's how Filmthread is able to compete with websites that have far more resources and money. How, I'm able to do content on a low budget level. So coming up with those processes is important. And another project, I'll announce it here right now. Filmthread is putting on an award show.
Oh yeah,
we're doing an award show called Award This. Award This. You can go to awardthis.com or just follow Award This on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Award This. The intention of it is, because I'm a big fan of award shows. I love the Oscars. I love the Independent Spirit Awards. But I think in the marketplace, I'm sure you've seen this, I kind of feel like some of these award shows are ignoring a vast library of films. In some ways, some award shows have just become Oscars Junior. Right?
Yeah.
So like the same people that the Oscars are at all these other award shows. What's the difference? Award This is going to be presented in LA. You can't buy a ticket to the Oscars. You can't get into the Spirit Awards. You can buy a ticket to Award This. So if you go to awardthis.com, you're going to be able to go to an event where we're going to award low budget indie movies. These are true indie films. We've broken up the categories.
So $10 million.
Yeah, no. These are going to be mostly movies under 100,000, but indie sci-fi, indie comedy, indie horror, indie LGBTQ films, indie, like we're breaking it down by genre, kind of like the Globes does, but all indie films. Indie ensemble cast. We are going to give an award to the biggest Oscar snub. So whatever the Oscars ignored, we're going to take all the people that were ignored. We're going to nominate them. Hopefully one will show up. But the purpose of this is because when you look at award shows and how they function and how political and it is, it's BS. It's a lot of bullshit. I'm pretty sure can I swear on this?
Yeah, well, it's too late. You already have.
I already have. But you know what I mean? It's something you make up. But genuinely, we see so many of these films. I'm like, why? And I'm a big fan of documentaries, but there are genres of documentaries. There are sports documentaries. There are, music documentaries. There are pop culture documentaries. There are social issue documentaries. I happen to like all of those types of docs. But why do they compete with each other? We know when it comes to awards giving, it's always a social issue documentary that ends up winning the day, and that's great. But there are all other types of doc films. So we've broken up our documentary films category into multiple genre categories.
And when is this coming out? When is this coming out?
The awards show will be presented on February 6th, 2020, which is oddly enough the 35th birthday of the first issue of Film Threat coming out.
That's awesome.
Same day. So we're going to put on this award show. And I'll tell you what the eligibility requirements are. Very simple. All you have to do is be commercially released in the previous year, so 2019.
Okay.
You have to be, so it doesn't matter. VOD, streaming, it doesn't matter. Even YouTube. Is your movie commercially available to see in some form? I don't care if it's on Crackle, doesn't matter. Yeah. There's only one other requirement. You need to be reviewed on filmthreat.com.
Okay.
So if you go to filmthreat.com, there's a little button at the very top that says submit. Just click on submit your movie to be reviewed. And once you get a review on filmthreat.com, you're commercially available, because when you play at a festival, you may not have distribution yet. It's not commercially available. We want to make sure that we're championing movies that people can actually see in some form. So February 6th is the date. Award This is the event. I hope that it grows as an event. So
that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so that's happening. So I hope that you'll mention it to some
of your, course.
Maybe on some other podcasts or what other episodes of your show. I'm excited because I've always wanted to do. I feel like there's just a whole group of films. Like and even my taste in indie movies is like I like trauma movies as much as I like
Lloyd,
a social issue documentary.
Yeah.
Lloyd Kaufman's a hero of mine, right?
Sure.
But Lloyd Kaufman's never going to win a Spirit Award. But I will say that Lloyd Kaufman, there's a distinct possibility that he and or some of his films will be eligible to win awards at Award This.
And he might get the Lifetime Achievement Award at Award This. You should probably give him the very first Lifetime Achievement Award.
I think so, because if you know anything about Lloyd Kaufman, who has mentored and fostered talent like James Gunn, who is one of the longest existing, if not
except for Corman, maybe.
Except for maybe Corman, but like how active is Corman now? I feel like Troma may be the longest existing independent film company in it. I mean, going to Cannes since the 70s, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
45 years. Yeah,
you got to read. I mean, you just read Lloyd's book. Go make your own damn movie. Make your own damn movie. He's just, it's an amazing book.
He was like one of my first interviews. I love Lloyd. He was great.
Love Lloyd. His very practical advice. Very much like a guy who fights and has survived. So this is what we're trying to do with this event. It's our Film Threats annual event to acknowledge these films and give them a voice. And because we see so many things that only come out, they're just direct to VOD, like those direct to VOD, direct TV premieres, right? Like, why shouldn't they have? I mean, competing with other films that are in the same genre and space, right? Horror, sci-fi, drama.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome, dude.
So yeah, check it out. We did it as sort of a test last year. We just did it on YouTube. And this year we're kind of upping the game, and every year we hope that the event will grow.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. Well, you're definitely you're definitely fighting the good fight for the independent filmmaker, and have been for many, many years. So I do appreciate what you do, and you're trying to shine the light and throw a little oxygen over this way, as opposed to just the Marvel and Star Wars worlds, which we all love. But I think you're right. Yeah. You do need that balanced diet without question. Now, I want to ask you a few questions I ask all my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
The advice I would give is to make a 1-minute movie that is good. 1 minute. And then what you do is you make a 5-minute movie that's good. Then maybe you make a 10-minute movie that is good. And when I say good, I mean someone who isn't you liked it.
Right.
And scale. Sometimes I meet these filmmakers that are like, well, I'm just going to go. They've never made a short film. They never made anything.
I just need 3 million. I just need 3 million.
I just need 3 million. How do you know you need 3 million? Basically, you need to fail when it doesn't matter, when no one's looking, as a way to learn.
Yes.
So make mistakes. If you can make a 1-minute movie, which is a lot to ask someone, because I can tell you when you scroll through YouTube, I'm as guilty of it as anybody. 15 seconds, I'm not there, I'm out. First 30 seconds. I mean, our attention spans have definitely eroded. So take baby steps, learn your mistakes when it doesn't matter, and don't that whole philosophy, fix it in post. No, fix it in prep.
Fair enough. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Oh God. Wow. Boy, that's an
Oprah question.
That's a big question. I think really what took me a while to kind of grasp was just to think strategically. And by that, I mean for good, not evil. Think strategically of like, well, why am I having this interaction with this person? For some, a lot of instances, I'm just out to make friends. Cause I think when you met me, when we were at that party at the bar, I remember at Slam Dance, I'm just out to have fun and meet people.
Yeah.
And that's great. But I think that you need to think about, and by that I mean think about, well, what is this other person? What do they want, right? Is there a way for us to have a something that's mutually beneficial. And I feel that the way I've been able to build Film Threat and these other things is I try to seek out people that have similar passions, similar goals, similar, just something where we're on the same page. We're on the same team. I like to take people on idealistic, foolish crusades. That's what I like to do. So anyone I'm involved with, whether it's someone I'm working with on an award show, this award show, if it's someone I'm working with on Film Thread, if it's our video team, it's all like we have the same passion. So I look for, and I also look, what I like to give is I like to make sure that the people that I'm hiring get something more out of it than money, because a lot of time there's not a lot of money. So you got to see, well, what does this person want? Well, they want a credit. Great. Can make that happen. I want experience. Great. You're going to get experience. Because when you look at, and this circles back to awards, when they ask people, do you want to raise your typical 2% raise in the corporate world, or do you want to be acknowledged as the employee of the year? Most people choose to get some form of acknowledgement by their peers, because people want the attention and acknowledgement. So whatever you can do to build someone up, whether you're building them up in a way that helps them sort of reach their next level, that I think is so learning how to mentor, I think, was the thing that was something I've learned. I feel like I'm still learning, right? Like I'm not.
We all are. We all are every day.
I'm leveling up.
Now the toughest question of all: 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh wow. See, that is one of those questions where you ask, and if I were a robot, I would explode. But a couple responses to that. One is Night of the Living Dead, the original 1968 George Romero film, because it's so iconic. He created the zombie movie genre, and then what he did was, because he created the rules, you die, you rise from the dead, you can only die by getting shot in the head, right? He created that and basically made it open source, so other creative people could come and build on that mythos. It's not like George Lucas or another creator that'd be like, we need to own all the IP, including all the names, including all the this. It's like George Romero made this little independent film, and other people made zombie movies. And his casting of Dwayne Jones in the lead as Ben, I think, is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. The fact that he did that then, and I'm not sure if that's the first film that had an African-American lead in the lead, but people asked, are you going to change the script? He changed nothing about the script, and it just added so much more meaning. The other film I would say is Slacker, Richard Linklater's Slacker. Mm-hmm. I was fortunate enough to see an early cut of it on a VHS that Linklater sent a handwritten note to me, and I think in an interview on a documentary, he talks about that maybe Film Threat might distribute Slacker. He sent me a version that was 20 minutes longer than the theatrical version. I saw it, it blew my mind. I just blew my mind, that film, like what you could do with this, it's a day in the life of Austin, Texas, and meeting all these odd characters. It really feels like Austin. I love that movie. And then I would say probably the original Star Wars, because that's really what set me on a path. It really is. If you think about it, it's one of the biggest independent films ever made, because George Lucas was truly an independent filmmaker, mm-hmm. right? So Star Wars, Slacker, Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Good
trio.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find you and find out more about what you're doing and everything else?
Well, let's list all the things I'm doing right now. You can go to filmthreat.com, and we're Film Threat on everything, all social media. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in being eligible for Award This, go to awardthis.com. We're Award This on everything. If you're interested in contributing to my documentary Kickstarter, and I will send you a personal thank you note, which will come from me. Mm-hmm. We'll start a conversation on Kickstarter. Just go to attackofthedoc.com. We're also Attack of the Doc on everything. And my personal social media, which quite frankly, I don't use so much anymore. My feed is pretty much just retweets from all of those other places. I'm that Chris Gore on everything. So just go to that Chris Gore, Twitter, Instagram, on Facebook, all of that stuff. Thank you for asking.
No worries. No, and Chris, man, it has been a pleasure. We could sit and talk about film for another 5 hours easily. We should do something in the future, without question. I think it was a lot of fun, man. But thank you so much for being on the show, man. Thank you for doing everything you've done for, and I don't want to, you're an OG You know, you're an
Okay.
original gangster. You're an original gangster in this space. And you've helped a lot of filmmakers over the years with Film Threat and with what you've been able to do for independent filmmaking in general. So I really do want to thank you for the work you do and are continuing to do it, because a lot of people could have just, you know, walked away, but you stayed in the fight, and now you're back with a vengeance with Film Threat again, and now you're doing an award show and you're doing the doc, and you're doing so much that you're really just trying to push the independent medium back to where it was in the glorious 90s.
Thank you for that.
But I appreciate everything you do, brother.
Well, and let's wrap this up because, hey, I want to just say happy Halloween to everybody. I'm actually, I don't know if you noticed, I'm wearing a Wayland Yutani jacket. You know, I got the Nostromo logo on here. You know, this is my Nostromo crew jacket.
Yes.
So, and you got to get your kids out for trick or treating.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Wait, is it cool to celebrate Halloween anymore? I'm just
at the age of
Wayland Yutani employee.
At the age of my girls, yes. We'll see how long they're still young. They're in elementary still, so it's still. I'm enjoying every Halloween as much as I can, every Christmas as much as I can before it all goes to crap. So,
Awesome.
Chris,
thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Take care.